In the morning, as Lucky was getting ready to leave, Mrs. Linda walked up to him, a sly smile on her face. "Hey, Lucky, I hope you had a good time last night," she said, her voice husky. Lucky nodded, feeling a sense of unease. "Yeah, I did. Thanks for everything, Linda." Mrs. Linda chuckled. "Oh, it's not over yet, Lucky. I've got a little surprise for you." She pulled out her phone and sent him a text. Lucky's eyes widened as he saw the notification. 300,000? "Linda, what's this for?" Mrs. Linda shrugged. "Just a little something to show my appreciation. But there's more where that came from, Lucky. If you continue to be good to me, I'll open a business for you." Lucky's eyes nearly popped out of his head. "A business? What kind of business?" Mrs. Linda smiled. "Oh, I don't know. Maybe a club or a restaurant. Something that will make you rich and successful." Lucky felt like he was dreaming. "Linda, I don't know what to say. This is too much." Mrs. Linda waved her hand dismissively. "Don't say anything, Lucky. Just promise me you'll continue to take care of me, and I'll take care of you." Lucky nodded eagerly, feeling like he was selling his soul. "I promise, Linda. I'll do anything for you." Mrs. Linda smiled, satisfied. "Good boy, Lucky. I knew I could count on you." As Lucky left Mrs. Linda's house, he felt like he was walking on cloud nine. He had never felt so alive, so powerful. As Lucky made his way to the hospital, he couldn't shake off thoughts of Mrs. Linda. He kept wondering how one woman could be so wealthy, so extravagant. He thought about the 300,000 she had sent him and how she had promised to open a business for him if he continued to please her. That woman is something else, Lucky thought to himself. She spends money like it's nothing to her. I've never seen anyone like her before. He couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at Mrs. Linda's wealth and power. He had never met anyone like her before, and he wasn't sure if he ever would again. As he approached the hospital, Lucky's thoughts turned to Miracle. He wondered what he would tell her, how he would explain the sudden influx of money. Should I tell her the truth? Lucky thought to himself. Or should I come up with some excuse, some lie to explain where the money came from? Lucky didn't know what to do. He knew that Miracle would be suspicious, would ask questions, and he didn't know if he was ready to answer them. Maybe I'll just tell her I got a loan, Lucky thought. Or maybe I'll say I won the money. Yeah, that's it. I'll say I won the money in a contest or something. But deep down, Lucky knew that Miracle wouldn't believe him. She would see right through his lies, and she would demand the truth. As he entered the hospital, Lucky's heart was racing. He didn't know what to expect, didn't know what Miracle would say or do. All he knew was that he had to be honest with her, had to tell her the truth no matter how difficult it might be. As Lucky entered the hospital room, he was immediately struck by Miracle's bright smile. She looked radiant, despite being stuck in a hospital bed. "Hey, babe," Lucky exclaimed, walking over to her side. "How are you doing today?" Miracle's smile grew wider. "I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. I'm so happy to see you." Lucky leaned over and kissed her forehead. "I'm happy to see you too, Miracle. I brought you some food. Your favorite." Miracle's eyes lit up as Lucky handed her the bag. "Thank you, Lucky. You're the best." As Miracle dug into the food, Lucky sat down beside her, trying to think of what to say. He had planned to tell her about the money, about Mrs. Linda and her extravagant gifts. But now, looking at Miracle's happy face, he changed his mind. "Hey, Miracle," Lucky said, trying to sound casual. My auntie said she's going to open a business for me. Miracle's eyes widened in excitement. That's amazing, Lucky. What kind of business? Lucky shrugged, trying to play it cool. I don't know yet, but she said it's going to be big. She's going to make me rich. Miracle squealed with delight. Oh my God, Lucky. That's incredible. You must be so happy. Lucky nodded, feeling a pang of guilt for lying to her. But he couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth. Not now, not when she was so happy. Yeah, I'm really happy, Miracle, Lucky said, trying to sound sincere. I'm going to be set for life. Miracle grinned, taking another bite of her food. I'm so proud of you, Lucky. You deserve it. As they continued talking, he knew he had lied to Miracle, and he didn't know how long he could keep up the charade. A week later, Miracle was finally discharged from the hospital, and Lucky was overjoyed to see her settle back into her own home. He had visited Mrs. Linda as usual, and she had promised him that she would start setting up the business for him by next week. Lucky couldn't wait to share the news with Miracle. He arrived at her house, beaming with excitement. Hey, babe, guess what? Lucky exclaimed, barely containing his enthusiasm. Miracle looked up from her book, a curious expression on her face. What is it, Lucky? You look like you're bursting with news. Lucky took a deep breath, hardly able to believe it himself. My auntie said she's going to set up my business by next week. Miracle's eyes widened in surprise, and then a huge smile spread across her face. Oh my God, Lucky. That's amazing. Congratulations. Lucky grinned, feeling like he was walking on air. Thanks, Miracle. I'm so happy. I can't believe it's finally happening. Miracle set aside her book and pulled Lucky into a tight hug. I'm so proud of you, Lucky. You deserve this. You've worked so hard for it. Lucky hugged her back, feeling grateful for her support. Thanks, Miracle. I couldn't have done it without you. You've been my rock through all this. As they pulled back, Miracle's eyes sparkled with excitement. So, what kind of business is it going to be? Have you decided yet? Lucky shrugged, still grinning. Not yet, but my auntie said she has some ideas, maybe restaurant or something else. She's going to take care of everything, so I don't have to worry about a thing. Miracle nodded, looking impressed. Wow, Lucky. You're really lucky to have her as a relative. She sounds amazing. Lucky nodded in agreement. She is, Miracle. She's the best thing that's happened to me. As they continued talking, Lucky couldn't help but feel grateful for the turn his life had taken. He knew he still had a long way to go, but with Miracle by his side and Mrs. Linda steady crediting, he felt like he could conquer the world. Hours later, after Lucky had left Miracle's house, on phone call, Mrs. Linda's voice was weak and shaky on the phone. Lucky, I need your help. I'm not feeling well. Lucky's heart skipped a beat as he heard the distress in her voice. What's wrong, Linda? What's happening? Mrs. Linda coughed, her voice strained. I think I need some medication. Can you come over and help me get some? Lucky didn't hesitate. Of course, Linda. I'll be right there. Mrs. Linda's voice was laced with gratitude. Thank you, Lucky. I don't know what I'd do without you. Lucky felt a pang of concern as he quickly got dressed and rushed out the door. Don't worry, Linda. I'll be there soon. As he drove to Mrs. Linda's house, Lucky couldn't help but wonder what was wrong with her. She had always been so strong and capable, and it was unnerving to see her vulnerable like this. When he arrived at her house, Linda was waiting for him at the door, looking pale and clammy. Thank you, Lucky. I really appreciate it. Lucky helped her into the car and drove her to the pharmacy. his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if she was seriously ill? What if he couldn't help her? But for now, he pushed those thoughts aside and focused on getting her the help she needed. As they waited in line at the pharmacy, Mrs. Linda leaned on him, her weight heavy on his arm. "Thank you, Lucky," she whispered again, her eyes closed. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Lucky felt a surge of protectiveness towards her. He would do anything to help her, to make her feel better. After they bought drugs, Lucky helped her settle in and made sure she took her medicine. He stayed with her until nighttime, chatting and watching TV together. Meanwhile, Miracle decided to surprise Lucky with a visit, but when she arrived at his house, he wasn't there. She called him repeatedly, but Lucky continued to busy her calls. Mrs. Linda noticed his phone ringing and raised an eyebrow. "Aren't you going to answer that, Lucky?" Lucky shook his head, trying to play it cool. "No, it's just my sister. She can wait." Mrs. Linda smiled knowingly. "Your sister, huh? You must be very close to her, aren't you?" Lucky nodded, feeling a pang of guilt. He had always told Mrs. Linda that Miracle was his sister, not wanting to reveal the truth about their relationship. Meanwhile, Miracle continued to call Lucky, but he refused to answer. She left multiple voicemails, each one sounding more worried and confused. "Hey, Lucky, where are you? I came to visit you, but you're not home. Call me back as soon as you can. I'm starting to get worried." Lucky listened to the voicemails later, feeling a mix of emotions. He knew he had to talk to Miracle eventually, but he didn't know how to explain his situation. As the night wore on, Lucky stayed with Mrs. Linda, trying to push aside his feelings of guilt and unease. Later that night, Lucky got up to take a bath, leaving his phone behind. Mrs. Linda was sitting on the couch, watching TV, when his phone started ringing again. "Should I answer it?" Mrs. Linda asked, looking at the phone. Lucky, already in the bathroom, didn't respond. Mrs. Linda decided to answer it anyway. "Hello," Mrs. Linda said, her voice smooth and confident. "Hello. I've been calling Lucky. Where has he been?" Miracle asked, sounding worried. "Oh, you're Lucky's sister?" Mrs. Linda replied, her tone friendly. "Don't worry, he's bathing right now. He'll call you back when he's out." Miracle was about to ask who Mrs. Linda was, but before she could, Mrs. Linda had already ended the call. Miracle was left staring at her phone, confused and frustrated. Who was that woman, and why did she seem so familiar with Lucky's schedule? Meanwhile, Mrs. Linda put down the phone and smiled to herself. Family stuffs, I guess. Minutes later, when Lucky came out of the bathroom, Mrs. Linda told him about the call. "Your sister called again, Lucky. I told her you were bathing and would call her back later." Lucky's eyes widened in shock when Mrs. Linda told him she had answered the call. "You picked up the call?" he asked, his voice laced with panic. Mrs. Linda nodded, a curious expression on her face. "Yes, I did. What's wrong, Lucky? You look like you've seen a ghost." Lucky tried to compose himself, but his mind was racing. "What did you say to her?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Mrs. Linda raised an eyebrow. "I told her you were bathing and would call her back later. But Lucky, is everything okay? You're acting strange. Is there something you're not telling me?" Lucky knew he had to cover up quickly. He couldn't let Mrs. Linda suspect anything. "Oh, no, everything's fine. I was just avoiding her call because she needs money and I don't have it right now." Mrs. Linda's expression softened. "Oh, Lucky, you should have told me. I can give you money to give to her tomorrow." Lucky felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had dodged a bullet. No, it's okay. I don't want to bother you with that. But Mrs. Linda insisted. No, Lucky. I'm happy to help. I'll give you the money tomorrow, and you can give it to her. Now let's forget about this and enjoy the rest of the evening. Lucky nodded, feeling grateful, but also guilty. As they watched TV together, Lucky's mind wandered back to Miracle. The next day, when Lucky walked into his house, but his smile quickly faded when he saw Miracle's angry face. Where did you sleep yesterday? Miracle demanded, her voice firm and authoritative. Lucky tried to play it cool, but he knew he was in trouble. I slept at my friend's house. Miracle raised an eyebrow. Your friend's house? Which friend? Lucky hesitated before answering. My auntie's house. Miracle's eyes narrowed. Your auntie's house? The same auntie who picked up your call yesterday and referred to me as your sister. Lucky nodded, trying to downplay the situation. Oh, yeah. Maybe she didn't know it was you, Miracle. She's a bit forgetful sometimes. But Miracle wasn't having it. Forgetful? Lucky, I don't believe you. Who is this woman, and why does she call me your sister? Lucky sighed, trying to think of a convincing lie. She's just a family friend, Miracle. I don't know why she said that. Maybe she was just confused. But Miracle was fed up with his excuses. Lucky, I'm tired of your lies. You're not telling me the truth, and I deserve better than that. Lucky tried to apologize, but Miracle cut him off. No, Lucky. I don't want to hear it. I'm leaving. And with that, Miracle angrily grabbed her bag and stormed out of the house, leaving Lucky feeling guilty and worried. If only she knew what I have done just because of her, Lucky said to himself. The next day, Lucky stood outside Miracle's house, nervously fidgeting with his hands. He knew he had to apologize and make things right between them. He took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Miracle opened it, her expression still angry. In. What do you want, Lucky? Lucky stepped forward, his eyes pleading. Miracle, I'm so sorry about yesterday. I promise it won't happen again. Miracle crossed her arms, her expression unyielding. Sorry isn't enough, Lucky. You need to tell me who that woman was. Lucky hesitated, knowing he couldn't reveal the truth. Miracle, please understand. But Miracle cut him off. No, Lucky. I won't understand until you tell me the truth. Who is she? Why does she call me your sister? Lucky tried to think of a convincing lie, but Miracle's eyes seemed to bore into his soul. He knew he couldn't deceive her again. Miracle, please? But Miracle wasn't having it. Lucky, if you don't tell me the truth, I'm done. I deserve better than a boyfriend who lies to me. Lucky knew he was running out of options. He couldn't lose Miracle, but he also couldn't reveal the truth about Mrs. Linda. He knelt before Miracle. Lucky continued to beg for forgiveness. Miracle, please just give me another chance. I promise I'll make it up to you. But just as Miracle was about to respond, Lucky's phone rang, interrupting the tense moment. He hesitated before answering, knowing he couldn't ignore the call. Hello, Lucky said, trying to sound casual. Guess what, Lucky? Mrs. Linda's voice chimed in, her tone excited. Your shop is ready. I know I said it would take 7 days, but I managed to get everything done sooner. Come over, and I'll take you to the place. Lucky's eyes met Miracle's, and he knew he had to think fast. Okay, I'll be right there, he said, trying to sound nonchalant. When he ended the call, Miracle raised an eyebrow. That was about the shop, wasn't it? Lucky nodded, trying to downplay the situation. Yeah, it's ready. I need to go see it. Miracle's expression turned skeptical. And who was that on the phone? Lucky hesitated, knowing he couldn't reveal the truth. "That's my auntie," he said, trying to brush it off. Miracle's eyes narrowed. "Lucky, I know you're not telling me the truth. Who is she?" Lucky sighed, feeling trapped. "Miracle, please just trust me. I'll explain everything later." But Miracle was fed up with his excuses. "No, Lucky, I want to know now. Who is she? And what does she have to do with your shop?" Lucky knew he was running out of options. He couldn't reveal the truth about Mrs. Linda as he rushed out to meet with Mrs. Linda. Minutes later, when Lucky met Mrs. Linda, she smiled warmly and took his hand. "Come, Lucky, let's go see your shop." She led him to a beautiful supermarket filled with all sorts of goods. Lucky's eyes widened in amazement as Mrs. Linda handed him the keys. "This is yours, Lucky. Your own supermarket. I told you I would do great things for you." Lucky was overjoyed. He couldn't stop thanking Mrs. Linda, hugging her tightly. "Thank you so much, Linda. I don't know what I would do without you." Mrs. Linda smiled, her eyes shining with warmth. "As long as you're loyal to me, Lucky, I'll do even more for you. You're my baby, of course." Lucky's heart swelled with gratitude. "I'll always be loyal to you, Linda. I promise." Mrs. Linda's face drew closer, her lips brushing against Lucky's cheek. "I know you will, Lucky. And as a reward, I'll give you even more." Her lips moved to his, and Lucky felt a rush of excitement. He knew he was in deep, but he couldn't resist Mrs. Linda's charms. "I'll do anything for you, Linda," Lucky whispered, his heart racing. Mrs. Linda smiled, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "I know you will, Lucky, and I'll make sure you're rewarded beyond your wildest dreams." Now, do you think Lucky is now falling for Mrs. Linda's game? Mrs. Linda smiled slyly at Lucky. "Now that we have the supermarket, we need to celebrate." Lucky grinned, knowing where this was headed. "Absolutely. I'd love to celebrate with you." Mrs. Linda's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Great. Let's go to my house and do something special." Lucky raised an eyebrow, playing innocent. "What did you have in mind?" Mrs. Linda's voice dropped to a sultry whisper. "You know what I need, Lucky. You know how to appreciate me special." Lucky's heart skipped a beat as he understood her hint. "Oh, I think I do," he replied, his voice low and husky. Mrs. Linda's smile grew wider. "Good. I want you to show me how much you appreciate me tonight." Lucky's face drew closer to hers. "I'll make sure you feel appreciated, Linda, in every way possible." Mrs. Linda's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "I'm counting on it, Lucky. Let's go." As they drove to her house, the tension between them grew thicker. Lucky knew what was expected of him, and he was more than willing to deliver. When they arrived at her house, Mrs. Linda led him straight to the bedroom. "Let's get started, Lucky. I want to feel your appreciation." Lucky's heart raced as he began to undress her, his hands roaming over her curves. "I'll make you feel so appreciated, Linda. Just relax and enjoy." And with that, they embarked on hours of passion and pleasure, their celebration of the supermarket's opening turning into hours of intimate connection. After hours of making love, Mrs. Linda headed to the kitchen to make something for them to eat. Lucky picking up his phone, his heart sank as he saw 8 missed calls from Miracle. He quickly dialed her number, and she answered on the first ring. "Miracle, I'm so sorry I missed your calls." "What's wrong?" Lucky asked, trying to sound concerned. Miracle's voice was shaking, and she was sobbing uncontrollably. "Why are you treating me like this, Lucky? You've changed since my stay at the hospital. You're always busy, and you don't have time for me anymore." Lucky tried to calm her down. "Miracle, that's not true. I've just been busy with work and..." But Miracle cut him off. "Don't lie to me, Lucky. You promised to come back to my place, but you never showed up. Is that how you treat someone you care about?" Lucky felt a pang of guilt. "Miracle, I'm sorry. I got caught up with something, and I lost track of time." Miracle's sobs grew louder. "Something? You mean someone, don't you? You're with her, aren't you? That woman who answered your phone." Lucky tried to deny it, but Miracle wasn't having it. "Don't lie to me, Lucky. I know what's going on. You're just using me for your own convenience." Before Lucky could respond, Miracle ended the call, leaving him feeling guilty and worried. He knew he had hurt her deeply, and he didn't know how to make it right. Mrs. Linda walked into the room, carrying a tray of food. "Hey, Lucky, I made some sandwiches, and..." But Lucky just shook his head, feeling defeated. "I need to go, Mrs. Linda. Something came up now, and I need to see my sister, Miracle." Mrs. Linda's expression turned concerned. "Lucky, is everything okay? You look upset." Lucky forced a lie. "Yeah, everything's fine. I just got a call from my sister, Miracle. She's not feeling well, and I need to go check on her." Mrs. Linda's face softened. "Oh, sorry to hear that. Do you want me to come with you?" Lucky quickly refused. No, it's okay. I'll be fine. I just need to go make sure she's all right." Mrs. Linda looked uncertain. "But Lucky, I don't mind coming with you. I want to make sure she's okay, too." Lucky knew he couldn't let Mrs. Linda follow him. She would discover that Miracle was his girlfriend, not his sister. "No, really, Linda. It's okay. I'll handle it. You stay here and rest." Mrs. Linda hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, Lucky. But if you need anything, call me. I hope your sister feels better soon." Lucky breathed a sigh of relief. "Thanks, Linda. I'll call you later." As he left Mrs. Linda's house, Lucky knew he had to make things right with Miracle. He also knew that his relationship with Mrs. Linda was a ticking time bomb, waiting to explode. Hours later, as Lucky arrived at Miracle's house, he took a deep breath, preparing himself for the emotional encounter ahead. He knocked on the door, and after a moment, Miracle opened it. They stood there, gazing at each other, the tension between them palpable. The silence was broken only by the sound of their heavy breathing. Lucky's eyes locked onto Miracle's, searching for forgiveness. Miracle's eyes, red from crying, seemed to bore into Lucky's soul. Without a word, Lucky's mouth slowly met Miracle's. The kiss was passionate, filled with longing and regret. They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, as the world around them melted away. As they entered the house, their lips still locked, Lucky knew he had to make things right. He broke away from the kiss, his eyes never leaving Miracle's. "Miracle, I'm so sorry," Lucky whispered, his voice trembling. "I was wrong to lie to you, to ignore you. You deserve so much better than that." Miracle's voice was barely audible. "Why, Lucky? Why did you do it?" Lucky took a deep breath, knowing he had to reveal the truth. "I was scared, Miracle. Scared of losing you, scared of losing myself. But I realize now that I was wrong to ignore you." Miracle's eyes searched Lucky's face, looking for sincerity. "I love you, Lucky, but I need to know that you'll be honest with me, that you'll prioritize me." Lucky's heart swelled with emotion. "I promise, Miracle. I'll do anything to make it right." I love you too, more than anything. Lucky tried to open up, to reveal the secrets he had been keeping, but the words got stuck in his throat. Miracle, sensing his hesitation, began to speak, but Lucky couldn't bear the thought of hearing her voice. Not yet. He pulled her close, engaging her in a deep, passionate kiss. "I've missed us," he whispered, his lips still touching hers. "I think we need this moment, just us, no discussions." Miracle's resistance crumbled under his touch. She melted into his arms, carried away by the intensity of their kiss. "I've missed you too," she breathed, her voice barely audible. Lucky's hands roamed over her body, reacquainting himself with every curve, every contour. Miracle's fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. Their lips danced, their tongues entwining in a sensual rhythm. Lucky's heart pounded in his chest, his love for Miracle overwhelming him. As they broke apart for air, Lucky's eyes locked onto Miracle's. "I need you," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. Miracle's eyes fluttered closed, her body surrendering to his touch. "I need you too," she whispered back. In that moment, nothing else mattered. No secrets, no lies, just the two of them, lost in their love. After making love, Lucky took Miracle's hand, leading her to his supermarket. As they walked in, Miracle's eyes widened in amazement. "Lucky, this is incredible. Congratulations." Lucky beamed with pride. "Thanks, Miracle. I'm glad you like it." Miracle turned to him, her expression curious. "So, this is your new business venture?" Lucky nodded. "Yeah, it is. But I want you to know that whatever I have is for both of us. We're in this together. Always." Miracle's face lit up with a smile. "That means so much to me, Lucky." Lucky pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "I'm sending you 300,000. I want you to start something of your own, something you're passionate about." Miracle's eyes widened in shock. "Lucky, I don't know what to say." Lucky's expression turned serious. "You don't have to say anything, and please don't ask me about the money right now. I'll tell you everything soon, I promise. Just trust me, okay?" Miracle nodded, her eyes shining with tears. "Okay, Lucky, if you say so." Lucky smiled, relief washing over him. "Good. I'll transfer the money to your account today. Let's build our future together, Miracle." Miracle's face glowed with happiness. "I'd like that, Lucky. I love you." Lucky's heart swelled with emotion. "I love you too, Miracle. Forever and always," as they hugged. Do you want to continue with this story? Subscribe to this channel and wait for the final part of this story.